go see it myself. So I'm with you. I'm linked. Okay. So I know that you had Arlene Schiff to give the first talk. I think I work now with maybe 22 or 23 different Jewish communities across the country, either for Leave a Legacy or the Crib Jewish Legacy programs, which are very similar. And I love doing these talks. You guys are usually more fun than the attorneys, so that doesn't take a whole lot, by the way. So this will be the talk. I am going to provide all of the handouts, so please don't feel free to need to jot all kinds of stuff down. So we'll send all the handouts out electronically. So here's what we're going to talk about within my time period before you can go see the final four, the finals tonight. So quick summary of endowment fundraising, bequest data and profiles, what I call three-prong. Every consultant's got three prongs. Three-prong prospecting plan. How do we engage our board? Key bequest marketing goals. That's a team exercise that's more on board engagement, prospecting, and marketing. So essentially things you can think about for your organization. Key bequest marketing mistakes, and maybe some potential homework for the next meeting too. So any questions you have, I've done this now 21 years, and I've worked just in, I think with the Jewish legacy community now for maybe 8 years, 7 years. So I think I've heard every question. Feel free to try to stump me. That's okay. I fly away. It's fantastic. I'll say all kind of things tonight. You don't believe this right now, but you will later. But that I get to fly away. You cannot imagine how freeing and refreshing that is. I don't know any of you, and I don't want to, so I can just say all kind of stuff. Fly off to Baltimore on Wednesday. So, all that sound good? Got a plan? Good? Okay. So here we go. So first, life and legacy. I think you know this intuitively, but you don't fully understand how much this program can transform this community. You think you do, but it's not up on a plane yet. When Mr. Levy talked about the Seder dinner downstairs, that was a legacy from one person that said, that's my passion. This is a bequest I want to leave back. So the things that I'm so passionate about today will happen forever. This is the opportunity that you can give to all of your constituents across the whole community, that opportunity. And there's a lot of pent-up demand. A lot of pent-up demand, and that's great. We'll talk about the reasons why, which is not so great, but we'll talk about that too. And I've got up here, it will accelerate a 10 to 15-year lag of legacy conversations. Now I'm going to get prickly right out of the gate, because that'll get your attention really fast. And I'll say some things that may annoy you a little bit, but I don't care. So I'm not Jewish. So I'm going to say some things that will needle you a little bit. If you ask me to grade Jewish giving for annual campaign, I would say generally A. I think that's objective. A. If you ask me to grade Jewish giving for capital campaign for most communities, A+. If there's a crisis involved, I've never seen anybody raise as much money at any time in my entire life. It is crazy what you can raise if there's any kind of crisis. You see where I'm going? When you then go down to endowment giving, you've got arts organizations and environmental that you beat. Everybody beats them. That's not the lane you want to be in. You're about a D. Generally about a D. And it makes no sense to me. No sense. I've had rabbis educate me as they should and continue to do. And they say, Bryan, two things. One, Christians like talking about death every 5 minutes. They get all excited about death. We're not so excited about death all the time. I'm like, okay, I kind of got that. And they said, and also as a people, I understand, the sense of permanence is different in our culture. And the fact that we've had to move means permanence doesn't take on the same weight. And I say, I understand, but call me ignorant. When I land in Philadelphia and I look at all these buildings all over the place, I see a whole lot of Jewish names. At universities, I see a whole lot of Jewish names. At hospitals, I see a whole lot of Jewish names. Why? Because they're asking them. They don't have, I will say for you, a mental hang-up that, oh, they don't like talking about death. That's uncomfortable. Not about endowment and permanence over time. That's uncomfortable. Well, that must be lost on every other nonprofit that goes and asks a Jewish donor to consider leaving an endowment gift, and then they're getting it. What am I missing there? it makes 0 sense. And it's almost like you're taking these relationships with your best donors to the 1-yard line, or we'll use the finals analogy, to the hoop. And then you stop. You stop having that additional question, that additional conversation around, you've been so helpful and supportive during your life. What would you like to be able to do to make that permanent? One of the best lines I ever heard, I'm going to give you all my good stuff early because some of you may want to leave to see the game. One of the best lines I've ever heard was an estate attorney, believe it or not, in Salina, Kansas. Nothing good happens in Salina, Kansas. So it's in Salina, Kansas. It was at a country club, very stuffy, and he stood up, and I shouldn't tell you this, but it's completely true. I was going to speak after him, and I'm like, I'm going to look great compared to this guy because he's very stuffy and stood up. And he said, you know what my job is as an estate attorney? He said, my job is to build your trust up enough so that you'll invite me into your garden. And when I'm in your garden, I want you to point out your favorite annuals, and I'll turn them into perennials. That's what I do. Like, that's pretty good.
That is good.
That's really good. And that's the point, is to be able to say, what is it about this community? What is it about the Seder dinner for the special needs kids downstairs that was her passion? Those are the kind of conversations to be able to have. And the reason why I know this is the case is I've got this 10 to 15-year lag of conversations. Miami's Miami. I get it. But Miami started 9 months ago. They now have 330 commitments for legacy gifts. Miami's Miami. But that also means, on one hand, you should celebrate like crazy. 330. That, but for this program, we would not have had. The flip side of that is, how in the world did you identify 330 new ones if you had been asking all the way along through the years, and that was not happening? And that's all that's missing. It's simply asking, having that conversation. Did I say all that with love? I hope so. Okay. So simple bequests, 90%. We've already talked about it. Competition is everywhere, and Jewish donors are giving endowment gifts everywhere but the Jewish community. When you look at the $5 million gifts plus from Jewish donors, 9% go to the Jewish community. Will that ever be 50%? No. I know it. Gifts are going lots of different places. They're not all going to go to the Jewish community. But should that be 13% or 15% or 18%? I'd suggest yes. Especially because of the deepness of the relationship that you already have, where you're already taking it right to the hoop. Just dunk the stupid ball. Dunk it. Dunk it. You're right there anyway. And other organizations, honestly, would almost kill you to have the deepness and longevity of the relationships you have. So this is just that final step. So lots of competition, but sometimes I think I would suggest, again, respectfully, you're psyching yourself out to be able to even have the conversation. So we'll talk about that too. And then two, now another 40 communities, when you're talking about life and legacy and Creative Jewish Legacy, which again is very, very similar. What I say here all the time, and follow what Arlene's recipe is, but I want to be gentle when I say this, but I'll be blunt, and that is, if you own a McDonald's franchise and they tell you to cook the hamburger for 37 seconds and then flip the stupid hamburger, I do not want to hear, oh, in Cherry Hill, we do it. Just cook it for 37 seconds and flip the stupid hamburger. Follow the recipe. Follow the steps. They are logical and rational, and they work in 40 other communities incredibly well now over almost 14 years. So just follow the steps, and it will work. Don't fight and rebel. Just follow the steps. Okay. See, I told you I'd be a little bit uncomfortable right out of the gate. That's just slide one. You okay? Keep smiling? Okay. So there she is. Oh, ideal bequest profile. I think she winked at me. 80-year-old widow, $75,000 in income. Why would I say this? Because the final estate plan done by individuals is between 80 and 82. 80 and 82 is the final revision to the estate plan that includes the largest charitable provision. You should also know, and I talked about this with the estate attorneys earlier, and advisors earlier, is for high net worth households in this whole country, high net worth households, that'd be $1 million of net worth or above, excluding the personal residence. $1 million or above, excluding the personal residence. 50%, half of those already have a charitable provision in their will or estate plan. Half. question is it you? Are you in there? That's the question. So we'll talk a lot about that on the prospecting side. So between 80 and 82, why not widower? So I'm an actuary by background, and all you learn, almost honestly, through Calculus 3, is that women are going to kill us all. All that math to figure out women are going to kill us off. I don't know why it takes that much, but somehow it does. So she will kill us off. We won't talk about all the reasons why. Let's talk about Mr. Levy earlier, too. Women generally give back much more broadly, more unrestricted fields of interest, broader kinds of gifts. Men love to restrict. We get so excited. We'll restrict everything. Restrict during life, restrict at death, we'll restrict everything. But generally, this would be the ideal bequest profile: 80 to 82, widow, income, childless, or the ability to turn them against their children, which is an excellent fundraising technique. You think, oh, you're not that good. I am. I'll tell you, I will give you an example of how it can be done. High holidays come along, going through the buffet line, and what you want to do is just drop little hints, and you say, oh, I guess the 2 kids had better priorities this year. They didn't come back for high holidays. Oh, well, see ya. And then you clip off. And if they stop, like, wait a minute, then you know you have them. So I'm joking, not turning the kids again. What's the point about childless? That the kids are okay. So Warren Buffett said, as you all know, he's got 900 good quotes. Give your kids so much that they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. And what is he doing? He's playing this out on the national stage where he's leaving his kids 2% of his estate, 98% to charity. Before you feel bad about the Buffett children, 2% times 56 billion is a lot. Even the Clontz household could go down to basic cable and ramen noodles. I could make 1.5 billion fit my budget. But that's what he's doing. What you, I think, would be the huge mistake would think that that's only happening at the billionaire level. It's happening at the millionaire next door level. T. Boone Pickens said, never put your child in a situation where he or she doesn't have the pleasure of bringing home a paycheck. You say that to a plumbing contractor, welding, that resonates. That makes them tingle. And I'm going to completely digress. You're still going to see the game. But I went to a talk one time, and it was a child psychologist in Beverly Hills. Would you not blow your head off if you had that job all day long? Well, anyway. So everybody else is dysfunction all day long. And I asked her, I said, in every single financial planning magazine, every estate planning magazine that I've ever seen, it has some article in there about don't leave your kids too much money because you're going to ruin them. Every single one's got something like that. I said, what's your experience? And I will never forget this as long as I live. She said, you know what? She goes, I've done this 35 years. And she said, you tell me how a 6 to an 8-year-old, 6 to 8, she goes, you tell me how a 6 to 8-year-old gets an allowance on Friday, let's say it's $10 on Friday, and you give me a little mini accounting of that on Sunday, and she said, I will tell you precisely how that person will spend an inheritance at age 55. She said, I will not be off. She said, $10 goes to the daughter, let's say, it's always the daughter, and she goes out and gets the lemons and the sugar and does the lemonade stand. She's got $30 on Sunday. Versus the son, always the brother, right? It's always the brother. The brother spent, the money with 37 IOUs to the sister. The thing's gone 10 minutes later. The brother at 55 gets $3 million and it's all gone 3 years later. Oh, couldn't see that coming. She said it is baked between 6 and 8, period. So it's just very interesting. And when she was saying all this, at that time I had a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I'm driving back to the airport going, oh my God, so I'm freaking out. But I don't want to spend too much time on this childless piece, but more and more people are saying, think about this sentence. I shouldn't tell you this too, but I don't care. You'll never see me again. This wasn't a conference, it wasn't a bar, and it was late at night. I will admit to all of those things. And we've all been there, I think, maybe most of us have been there, and somebody says something to you, you're like, that's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard in my life. And the next morning you wake up, you're like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. Well, I woke up the next morning like, that was still pretty good. She said, Brian, the only competitor to philanthropy is conspicuous consumption. That's it. Are you okay? Pad that 15 or 20% after the 2007, 8, 9 craziness. Kids okay? However you define okay. Every family makes their own decision. Grandkids, however you define that. And then the question becomes, then what? What do you do with that excess or surplus during life? And what do you do with that excess or surplus at death? And that's really all it is. That's what's happening with the T. Boone Pickens and the Buffett and the Gates. At the billionaire level, that's happening much more at the millionaire next door sort of level. Does all that make sense? I want you to understand kind of what the real drivers of these gifts are. Okay. 80% will never notify the charity. It will drive you insane. Insane. For every one gift that you know about, there will be at least 4, usually 5, that's why it's 80%, that will never tell you no matter what. It'll drive you crazy. And then gifts, you love this term, come from out of the blue. Oh, this gift just came in from out of the blue. Nothing in this world happens from out of the blue. Nothing. Somebody said the right thing in the right way at the right time to that person, and it was probably 10 or 15 years ago, which I don't care what your organizations are, I don't want to know. That was probably 10 development directors ago, if it's been that long. Probably 7 executive directors. They had a conversation. Nothing seemed to come of it. What are you going to put in the file with that? Nothing. Even if you did put it in the file, you lost all your files 5 years ago. And then this gift comes from out of the blue. Somebody connected with that person and encouraged them to think about something beyond their lifetime, what their bequest in this country is $65,000. Average bequest. The average amount, anybody know this? Average amount annually contributed to the charity prior to leaving that $65,000 bequest. What was the average annual gift to that charity? $2,000. $2,000? Give me some other guesses. 200. 200 is 110. $110 a year, less than $10 a month. Why? You know why. That's a gift from income versus a gift from an asset. I can give $110, but what if I get sick? What if I live until I'm 122? What if my kids get sick? I don't want to release all of it, but I can do the 110. Also, for older people, thank God, they don't welch. If they say they're going to leave a bequest, they're going to leave a bequest. But how do they know? What if they get sick? What if they live forever? Because they don't know that, they're not going to tell you. And if they're giving you $110 a year or $500 a year, and all of a sudden they say, now you're in my legacy plan for $65,000 or some number, what happens then? Now the rabbi's hugging them a little bit more. Now they're sitting them up front at high holidays a little bit closer. They're like, you know, I want to be off that radar a little bit. Does all that make sense? Sure, it makes sense. So this is all about faith. If you go out and have lots of conversations, the seeds are planted when they're doing their gifts, their estate plans. They start to include the synagogue, the day school, the J, whatever. That's what happens. That's how that works. And it does work. And the crazy thing about all this is, understand the concept known as a pipeline. This is not higher in math, I promise. If you get, let's say, two people for this Life and Legacy program that tell you they've done it this next year, how many did you really get? 10. For every one you know about, at least 4 out there that you've created that will never tell you. Okay? Now you've got 10. The average bequest is $65,000. What's 10 times 65? $650,000. That's more than any special event that you'll ever earn in a million years. But I won't pick on special events. The world does not need another special event. Okay, I'll stop. So, $650,000 in the pipeline. And then you do it next year. Same thing. You find out about 2. And then you do it the next year. And you do it the next year. When that money starts coming in, you know the answer to this, and you keep adding the same number each year, when will that money stop? Never! That's the game. That's the game. Salvation Army has 36 people full-time southeast just doing planned gifts. Has anybody seen a special event that Salvation Army runs? No. Like, I don't want special events. Let's talk about bequest giving. Does that make sense? That's the key. You got to stick with this. If you did Life of Legacy for a year or two and you got a whole bunch and then you stopped, gigantic waste of time. This has to become part of your culture, your giving language. Everything becomes institutionalized into your organization and your community to be able to sustain it long enough to get the momentum that when those gifts start coming in, they'll never stop. That's the game. It's as simple as that. This is Lynn's cap. This is not that complicated. Okay. Strong desire to give back, desire to create a personal legacy, finalizing estate plans. Well, that seems like they're making a capital gift or an annual gift. It's the same thing. These are not three-headed people with horns. These are the people who love you the most that are already giving, and they're just giving out of assets versus giving out of income. That's the only difference. Does all that make sense? I feel like I'm yelling a lot. Okay. All right. Got steps. So here are the ideal bequest donors. Number 2. Interestingly, there have been about 4 surveys that have all confirmed this. The first time that a charitable provision is included in an estate plan is between 58 and 62. And I've had so many people say, God, that just seems strange that it's that tight. Like, no, it's not. This is actually true. They revise their wills or estate plans 12 minutes after the last child graduates. That's about right. So the youngest child graduates from college, race down to the estate attorney, okay, let's revise all of our stuff. And where otherwise was for the kids' education, as is very appropriate, that then is shifted, in some part, over to their charitable interests. So the first time that a charitable provision occurs is between 58 and 62. The last time, and usually the largest, this is very general, of course, there are always exceptions, between 80 and 82. Okay.
What do you mean by that the donor is less engaged on a volunteer basis?
Yeah, likely they're going to be very engaged on a volunteer basis, like all the individuals we saw down at the Seder dinner. Yeah, so they're engaged, especially these are more the baby boomers. Baby boomers tend to lead with volunteerism and engagement first, and then the funds follow. The Depression era generation, not as much at all. Generation X is that on steroids, is almost micro-burst volunteerism, but not with traditional institutions. They usually don't like traditional institutions. They're the ones going to Israel for the trip, and then they do the Facebook thing and crowd fund a particular project that's going on over there, and then they're kind of done with it. Then they've moved on to something else entirely. So much more nimble. It's driving a lot of charities nuts, because if they're more traditional charities working with Depression era and even some of the baby boomers, the Generation X, Y, they cannot figure out. So it's got a lot of very scared. So here's the three-prong approach. So this gets back to the recipe. So if you were to say, okay, what can we do individually and collectively to be on 12 cylinders for bequest giving? This is what I would do from a prospecting standpoint. The first place I would go is the current board, very first place. And I'm going to be very, very blunt here. You thought I was so far. It's going to get a little bit crazy. I've done this 21 years. I have never seen an organization with less than actually I should say this, with more than 65% of the board participating in plan giving, more than 2/3 of the board participating in legacy. I've never seen that organization fail. Never. I've never seen one with less than 1/3 participating succeed. And anything between 1/3 and 2/3, you're flipping a coin. I believe incredibly that the board must lead. And I would shoot for 100% board participation. Everybody's going to freak out. Just give me 3 minutes. I'll pull the notes up. You'll be fine. By going to the board and asking for the board's leadership around legacy giving, there's a wonderful mathematical concept known as a percentage. It is glorious. You think you know what it is. It's fantastic. Percentage. If that person, let's say, has a total net worth of $10 on the board, and that person says, I've got a life insurance policy, or I should have one, to protect my kids or family. Or I've got an IRA, or 403b, or 401k, or I have a will or living trust. And I'm going to leave 1% of that to my synagogue. And 99% of that's going to my kids. Are the kids impoverished? They were already impoverished. They were going to get $10 total. Now they're getting $9.99. Does that make sense? Or $9.99? A percentage can allow anyone to participate at any socioeconomic level. And when you have a beneficiary designation on a life insurance policy or on a retirement plan, it costs them nothing to change any of that, and it takes about 5 minutes, and that's if they're slow. I love you, wife, 90% of my life insurance, but I also love the J 10%. All of these things are revocable. If I need everything in my IRA, then I will use everything in my IRA. None of that is irrevocable, and it only creates that gift upon death. When you're on the board, I need your participation. 2 issues come up. One, for anyone on the board who are going to be out having conversations around legacy gifts, or staff or other volunteers, every single person is petrified, and that's the right word, petrified, that you're going to go and have that conversation, and they're going to say, thank you so much for talking with me about legacy. I want to talk with you about an accelerated depreciation model on an S corporation. That's what you think is going to happen. That will never happen. You know what will happen? They'll look at you and say, I remember when I was on the board. And this legacy we talked about, endowment we talked about, and every time we do our long-term strategic plan, we jam endowment and plan giving into the long-term part of it. Every time. Because you love this phrase so much. We can't do it now. We got to keep the lights on. You love that phrase. You love it. Got to keep the lights on. Got to keep the lights on. Not too complicated. If you don't change anything today, and all you're doing is keeping the lights on, what are you going to be doing in 59 years? Keeping the stupid lights on. How many more $65,000 gifts can have a huge change for your organization forever? Forever. So you're saying, I've got to keep the lights on. Blah, 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 blah. Well, you keep doing that. And by the way, 125 to 150 new nonprofits are created every single day of the year in this country, including weekends and holidays. Yay! 3 times as many nonprofits have been created in the last 16 years. 3 times. Anybody get any government grants anytime soon? Never. Get any corporate grants anytime soon? If you're selling more of their stuff, corporations haven't had true foundations for 20 years. Anybody see J.P. Morgan sponsor a local soup kitchen recently? No. Why do they sponsor the symphony? You know why they sponsor the symphony? Because that's where their clients are. If you're helping sell more of their stuff or their services, you're good. If you're not getting a penny. So you've got more and more nonprofits chasing fewer and fewer resources. At the same time, Depression era, save everything, are leaving all of their inheritance down to their baby boomer children who do what? Spend everything. Plus some. Do you see the picture I'm painting? So you've got to be able to work with your closest friends and your best donors to encourage them to leave legacy gifts to your organization. And you've got to start with the board. Because what I tell the board is, what I tell every board, is don't you ever, ever put your fellow board members, your staff and volunteers in the situation where they're out on a call and the person doesn't bring up that accelerated depreciation schedule in the S corporation. The person says, oh, this is a priority. Oh, this is a big priority. Oh, it used to be a priority in the past. Oh, but it's a big priority now. We're participating in legal life and legacy and everything's great. Wow, it's a big priority. Oh, is it? Okay. How many of your board members are doing it? They ask that question, you're slammed against the wall. And that question will come up. So you go to your current board first and you say, I need your participation. Here are all the easy ways to be able to do it. Here's the mathematical concept called the percentage. All of this is revocable. But before we go out and have conversations with our closest friends, we've got to have leadership in your participation, period. And I'm well aware of the language that's very important to you as well. 2 words: follow me, join me. Very powerful phrases. And you can have a board member stand up. I'll tell you exactly how to do this. A board champion stand up, many of whom are in this room. Just say, here's what I have done. Just think if this board 10 years ago would have done this, or 20 years ago would have done this. You're all weird. You're like me. We read the obituaries, do we not? Yes, we do. And you read the obituary. Let me walk you through something that I'm sure has happened for you. And you're flipping through, and you see that Ruth had passed away. And you think, that is horrible. She was such an amazing person for our entire community. And you also think, I'll be bad, to say if anybody was ever going to leave us an estate gift, it would be Ruth. She was our first board president. She did all the things over here. She did that. She did this. You know right where I'm going. 6 months go by. No call from the executive. I wonder why. What happened? Maybe she has a complicated estate. A year goes by. God, the kids always seem nice at high holidays. I don't know what's going on. Maybe they're all fighting now. 2 years go by. Maybe she owns something weird in Ireland that we didn't know about. What was the issue? Were you in there? No! You never asked. You never asked. Oh, I just would have assumed that she would have known to have done that. Meanwhile, University of Pennsylvania is all over. You got 14 endowment gifts. Is this striking any kind of chord whatsoever? So you're able to say to the board, we need your participation. Join me, follow me. And I will describe for you, you're going to laugh, but I bet this you will appreciate this, who your board champion is. So when you're having that board meeting, this is your board champion. And I'm kind of serious. A board champion likes Costco a lot and gets lots of highlighters. They love highlighters for some reason. You think I'm joking. And then on the weekends, they will take all of these newsletters, plan giving newsletters, endowment newsletters, development newsletters, from all the organizations that they give to, and they'll sit there on the weekend, because they don't have a real big social life, and they highlight these newsletters. And they do these little stickies and write little notes in the stickies. Okay? And they'll take these little stack of newsletters, and they'll bring them into the office of, the synagogue or day school, whatever. And they'll say, well, here's a bunch of stuff. I don't know if this is helpful or not, but that might be helpful if ever you want to use it. And they kind of walk off. Do you know what that's code for? That's code for, I live in Cherry Hill and I know you, but you idiot, why aren't we doing more of that? That's what that's code for. Does this strike anybody? Usually you know who the person is. And if you're in here and you say, wait a minute, I don't know who that is, but I've got a lot of highlighters, and I like to write sticky notes, it's you. You're the board freak. That's great. You're among friends. We can all hug. So it's kind of like poker. If you don't know who the fish at the table is, it's you. So you're that person. That's the person that every time endowment or plan giving used to come up, they'd say, why aren't we ever talking about things beyond keeping the lights on? Why aren't we talking about things to say, we're going to be around forever? Why don't we start acting that way? Why don't we start building long-term financial sustainability of this organization so that the impact that we have today will happen forever? It's that person, and many of whom are in here, I'm a little weird. Does all that make sense? So you take that current board champion, you make that presentation to the board. The other thing that people get really hung up about is when they join the board, bait and switch. You love that. Bait and switch, bait and switch. We don't want to bait and switch the board. Stop. Every single nonprofit organization on the globe has a staggered board term. You just do. So if you don't have a new expectation for the whole board, when will you be able to change any policy from now until the end of time without being bait and switch? Never. Never. Rip the Band-Aid off. Say, this is something that's important. We should have had this as an expectation. We didn't. Sorry. Now it is. Does all that make sense? You'll never change anything ever if you take that approach. Current board, then you go to past board, potentially to staff, and to close friends. That is the model you go. Bump, bump, bump. Follow the recipe. 100% participation, easy solutions. Once you get at least 2/3 of your board, you're good. Go for 100%. Never seen one fail that's had more than 2/3 of the board participating. Never. Ever, ever, ever. Two, yeah.
Close friends versus long-term donors?
Yes.
To me, that's
Great question. Close friends are people, this is going to sound so bad, that if you read the obituary, you would have thought you should have been in there, because you're not. So they're the people that are so close, it's foolish for us to go have a conversation with them. I'm sure we're already in there, you're not. Long-term donors, you guys go too nuts too. You try to spend too much money on all this prospect research junk. Throttle back. I'm going to tell you how to do prospect research on your database, which are horrible, by the way, I'm sure, in about 3 minutes. What you do with your database for long-term donors is you run a report. It probably takes 9 people in a task force to run the report. But you run the report. And you run the report, and you say, this is not complicated at all, give me everybody that's given $1 or more for 15 years. And you might be thinking, Ronnie, you don't know Cherry Hill. We've only been around 10. Change the stupid date range. Make it 8. You play with the date range until you get 30 to 50 people. And then you hit print. And that's your whole database report research right there. Don't do anything else. It's dumb. Don't do anything else. I would much rather go to the person who's been giving me $100 a year for 15 years than the person that gave $10,000 for the first time last year. I want you to so appreciate this. When somebody does a legacy gift for you, that is a consummation of the relationship. So many people think, oh, if they do a legacy gift, they're going to stop annual giving. That never happens, and in fact, annual giving goes up. How can that be? You know exactly how that can be. If you've been given somewhere for 10 or 15 years and you love them, and you're basically making them part of your family by leaving them as a beneficiary of your will or of your insurance policy, your retirement plan, after you do that, you're going to say, boy, I just did that. I'm out. I don't know what happens with you guys. I don't care. I'm out. I don't care what happens. You're going to be more engaged with that organization rather than less engaged. That's just how that works. So that's how you do long-term donors. $1 or more, and include volunteers. That's giving of time. Some of the biggest Jewish legacy gifts I've ever seen in my life, docents. The J in D.C., it was the woman in Northern Virginia. I am positive, she's probably taught every single person how to swim. She was the swim teacher, Saturday from 8 to noon for 50 years. She never gave $1 during her life to that organization. 4 years ago she passed away, left $3.6 million for a new aquatic center. That's her passion. But she could have gotten sick. Her kids could have gotten sick. She could have lived forever. So including the volunteers in this as well is the key. 30 to 50 max. Max. Otherwise you get overwhelmed. So that's all you need. All that makes sense so far? Got to do the first one first. Do the recipe. Then you're able to go down and have the conversation with long-term donors after you've already got the board participating. Yeah.
Any factor of age?
Ideally, the older the better. I mean, that's just the fact of it, but not too old. So usually anything over about 84, 85 starts to get a little bit too old. But I would usually work my way backwards from those people that have had the longest relationships
So
down.
if this organization was to prospect or change their prospecting, they should do an age-related push-button print.
If you can.
Go to the
easily.
donors of a certain age and up.
Yes.
And use that as your prospecting tomorrow.
Yes. And especially when it goes back to, for most people, that 80 to 82 is the last estate revision that includes the largest charitable provision. So that's the case, you probably want to back down to that maybe 75 to 82, 85, kind of in that range. Would be ideal if you've got the database information to do that. Many don't, I'm well aware. But many of you know these people do. And the last one is what I call the general donor community. I include the 2 boxes. Oh, yeah.
Can you just touch on number 2 where you're coupling it with the ask? A lot of organizations are always doing the annual campaigns and so forth and so on. Where you're saying couple with the ask, are you saying, well, if you happen to be a part of that committee, also ask, or are you saying it's okay to ask at the same time, but it's better to be known as the legacy group versus asking for both at the same time?
That is a fantastic question, and I'm going to jump on a soapbox big time for about 3 minutes, so just indulge me. Charities screw up when they partition off legacy and endowment conversations with all the other development conversations. We've all been there, because what happens is that say, let me go call Ruth and ask her about her annual gift. And if she says yes, well then it's kind of weird that I'm double dipping if I ask about legacy gift. But then if she says no, then I don't really ask it, then I'll come back later and talk with her about legacy. So let us handle that first, because that's keeping the lights on, I get it. And then we'll see if we can add legacy gifts in later. And when does later come? Never. It never comes. So what I strongly suggest is what you're alluding to or intimating, and that is a combined, integrated ask. The same people who are your long-term donors that you're having conversations with anyway are the same people that are going to be for legacy gift. These are not people, again, that live up in the hills that you've never seen before. They're the same people. They're the same ones who've been chairing your special events for 5 years. Okay, cool. So, my joke is, which is painful, but I'll say anyway, is that most charities think that their donors are very confused all the time. Because that's the term they always use. We don't want to confuse them. That just gets so confusing. They love that term. And I said, oh, it's like, your donors are waking up in the morning and they're like, gosh, I got these legs and these holes in my pants. I don't know where I put the holes in the pants, and I got all the cereal in my bowl. How do I get the bowl in? They're not that confused. If you walk in and you say, Joe, I really appreciate what you did last year for us. Here's what we did at the J. Here were our key priorities. Here's what we did with your money. Here was the impact that that had. Here are our key priorities for this year. Would really hope that you'd be able to consider that gift or more for these particular priorities that we have. But so that we don't have to keep coming back to you for the next 812 years and then your kids and their grandkids about keeping the lights on all the time, we've been around long enough here. And now we're starting to ask our best donors and our closest donors to consider a long-term, perennial kind of gift, so that if they were to pass away or move on, and most importantly, so that they can take their passions and that we can be their stewards of that forever. Is that something that you might consider as well? Is there anyone in this room right now that is completely confused and has just completely lost any train of thought and have any sort of conversation that can go on at that point? No, it's dumb. Because when they get their Social Security check or they get their paycheck, they have to make the same confusing decision about literally keeping their lights on at the end of the month and hopefully putting some money away for their own retirement. Current needs, future needs. That's not confusing.
Donor fatigue, because there's a discussion that this model is not in sync with the donor fatigue model, that if all the organizations are going to the donor is going to say, I'm not giving anywhere, I'm tired of giving, or what's your big experience with that?
This is me, and again, I don't care who I've been, which is a problem with me. I think that's a crock. It's a good excuse to say, we don't want to bring it up because we're so concerned about the donor. Every single capital campaign in this country that's over $1 billion for every university, 50% of those plus are planned gifts. No universities are saying we got donor fatigue. Nobody else is saying you got donor fatigue. This is just simply saying, here are our current priorities, here are our future priorities, here are the 2 buckets. We'd like you to invite you to consider participating in each one of those. They can say no. They can also say yes. And I'll tell you this, I wouldn't even mention this, but I think it's very important. The Houston Legacy Program, and I'll never forget Barry, and they called him Buffet Line Barry, and he was one of these guys that he could not make a phone call to set up an appointment. He was hilarious. And he couldn't do a letter, but if you were in the buffet line, you knew he would come and lock in with you, and before you got through the buffet line, he was sitting down with you making an ask. That's just how he did all of his asks. They called him Buffet Line Barry. But for his synagogues, the Beth Shalom in Houston, he said, we're really worried about these gifts. We don't want to confuse donors, and we just had a capital campaign, and we don't want to get into it. He went out and he made 26 asks. 26. They got 21 yeses. 21. And one story I'll never forget, he said, I went to the pillar of the Houston community. Every community, every Jewish community in this country had 6 to 8 families. 20 or 30 years ago that did everything. That did everything. And those 6 to 8 aren't replicated. You've got to replicate them with 20 or 30 families coming in behind them. He said this was one of those 6 to 8. They built the Jewish community in Houston. And I went to him, and he said he was late 80s. Buffet Lineberry was like 64, hyper-successful business guy. He said, I felt like I was 12 years old walking in, because this was like the guy. This was the pillar of the guy. Of the 6 to 8 families, he said like 2 were left, and he was the one of the remaining ones. He said, I went in and started talking with him about the synagogue, about the endowment at the synagogue, why it was important, what the board members did. He said he was completely quiet, leans back in his chair. He said, in an awkward period of time, he's like, oh God, I messed up. And then he said, I've been waiting 25 years for somebody to come and have this conversation with me. 25 years. He said, we as a community built these things. But who's coming in behind them, behind us, to make them permanent? Who's doing that? So I don't think that goes to donor fatigue. This is just a different way of participating. Some people will say, some will, I don't believe in endowment, I want to give today, I want to do all those things. That's fantastic. And other people will say, I only feel comfortable giving $110 a year, but you know, if I'm not going to live forever or sick, or maybe I was sick and that's why I died, I can leave an estate gift of $65,000. I would love to do that back to these organizations that meant so much to me during my life. Everyone else, I cannot express to you enough, are having these conversations. And I never hear donor fatigue come up anywhere else. Will some be fatigued? Yes. And you know what? They're adults. They'll tell, I'm fatigued. Don't talk to me now. Come back next year. Let's talk then. But raising that question comfortably, saying why, and what if the organization would have done this 10 or 15, 20 years ago, where would we be today? Whine about that for 30 seconds max, and then say, but now we're starting today. Because if you started 20 years ago, you'd be great today. Well, you got to start now. That's the whole part of the Life Legacy program. Okay. Here, one time. Okay. I'm going to move on. So board engagement, I've already gone through this. Select board volunteer champion, invites them to join me, follow me. Goals 100% participation, no more than about a 12 to 15 minute board presentation max. I'd probably keep it closer to 10. And a great thing to do is to think about all of those gifts maybe that have already come to your organization, out of the blue because they didn't. But because they came in before you even had a legacy program at all, what you were able to do with those gifts. Because then you can tell the board, without us even doing these, without us even doing them, these people created gifts. Let's make this a much more formal program and actually proactively go out and start communicating this. How many more could we get? And some of these, I'll back up quickly here. I've got to include 2 boxes on your pledge cards. My joke is somebody ordered all your pledge cards in 1977 because they called the printer and the printer said, well, if you do 1 pledge card, it's $1. And if you do 1,000 pledge cards, it's $0.25 each. But if you do 1 billion pledge cards, it's like 1/10 of 1 cent. You know, like 1 billion pledge cards. I think all of the pack rat storage places in the whole country fill up with pledge cards. But when you change your pledge card, include 2 boxes. And you already know the boxes because they're on every single other pledge card that you've ever filled out. I would like more information about leaving an estate gift to your organization. I already have left an estate gift to your organization. That's it. And if you call me back after a year and you say, we didn't have one person check one of those boxes, and you know what I'll tell you? I don't care. Because humans are weird beasts. When we fill out pledge cards, we read all of the stuff on there. That's what we do. And even if they don't check the box, it's jamming in their head. I want you to fully appreciate 2 things. Most of your donors, believe it or not, do not realize that you are sophisticated enough to receive a bequest. Do you know what it means to receive a bequest? They send you a check. You cash the check. Well, I know the university can do that. Yeah, we can cash checks. I was like, it's a task force, but we'll figure out how to cash a check. That's what it means. Really. The life insurance company sends you a check. The IRA sends you a check. Your executor sells your junk and they send you a check. That's what it means. But your donors will say, I didn't know you were that sophisticated. Yeah, we can do that. We figured it out. Okay? But what they don't know, let me walk you through exactly what happens. You go to your estate attorney. You're paying that person a whole bunch of money to talk about all kinds of death stuff. What happens if all your kids kill you and you kill your gun? And all these like nightmare scenarios. And then they ask you somewhere in there, would you like to leave any charitable provisions? Right? Anybody that's done their will, that's what happens. Usually question 22 to 25. It's always in the middle. Okay? And then what always happens is the strangest thing. The husband will look at the wife for 1 second. They'll go, well, let's see. And then they both look up. I do not know why, but they'll go, well, let's see. Yep. Oh, you pin. Yeah, put pin in there. Good. Yeah, pin. Okay, good. Well, Cancer Society, because your dad, cancer. Yep. Okay, good. Cancer Society in there. Okay. There'll be about 2 to 3 seconds of silence. Okay, well, that's good. Your whole game is to jam your organization into their skulls. And every 5 to 7 years, they're going to have the opportunity to fill out a beneficiary form or a testamentary document like a trust or a will. And that question will come up. And they're going to look up. And if they look up and they don't see you, you're not in there. And that is the game. That's lens cap. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So everything you do, including testimonial articles in every newsletter or magazine, you're like, wow, that's what my university does. Yeah, it is, because it works. Just copy it. Don't reinvent anything. The pledge cards, talk about some other things too, but getting the board involved first, then going back out. All right. Donors must know you're in the bequest business. So I just pummeled this. They have to know you're in that business. And when they look up, they've got to see you. You're building the shelf space in their head, developing momentum from leadership down. And this is the big thing, the cultural shift, the language shift of your organization and your community broadly around legacy giving. And what we're finding more and more with these communities is when everyone is going out and having the same conversations, everything's so incestuous, it's crazy. Half your board's on their board and all this kind of stuff, or used to be. In a weird way, that's strange. But it's also great, because once you start all these conversations, it starts to snowball in a great way. And all the donors, gosh, people will shut up about this life and legacy program. That's what you want. Having lots of conversations all at the same time to build that momentum. And that's all life is. You get momentum here. Very hard to lose, but you got to get that momentum first. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this. These are just simply saying, write down the board champion, who could be the past board members. This will all come out in your materials when we send it out too. Some mistakes, failing to get board buy-in, spending too much money on marketing pieces. Slow down on the brochures. You guys go crazy with brochures. We're going to do a triangle brochure. Should it be Pantone Blue number 7 or Pantone Blue number 6? Nobody cares. No one cares. What should be the point size? Nobody. You must think, after 9 months of a task force putting these stupid things together, that when you mail out this trifold brochure, somebody's going to open up going, I've never even been to the J, but look at this Pantone Blue number 6 and it matches that guy's eyes and they're using a Times Roman. It's not, oh my God, it gives me tingles. Honey, I don't know who this is. Write him a check $100,000. You must think that's what happens by the amount of time and effort you put into this. The best salespeople I've ever seen in my entire life, I don't know if they're selling airplanes or life insurance or